Hello and welcome to the Whitwam Organics Weekly Garden Report and live question and answer session. My name is David Whitwam and I am your host. Thank you so much for joining me. It's cold, guys. What can I say? I've been looking forward to this weather since, I don't know, the weather went away last year. I absolutely love this time of year. I love this time of year for gardening. And I absolutely am not out there covering stuff up at every little cold front. And so we'll get into a little bit about some of the stuff that I really look forward to for this time of year, why I get so excited when it's actually cold out, and some of the things that you can do to prepare for this type of weather and to really, enjoy the season. Now, just be aware if you're watching this, I am gearing this more toward Central Florida. But I think a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about today, a lot of the concepts could definitely apply to others who are in other part of the state or in even people who are in other parts of the country. But before we get into all that, today's going to be kind of cool. We're going to actually probably roll right from the garden report straight into what we're talking about today. So nursery report, we've been continuously planting in succession more lettuce, spinach. We've been planting a lot of spinach. We have been, one thing we don't plant in our nursery is root crops ever. We don't sell them as plants. We only sell them as seeds. But it is time for some of those. But we'll get into that during the garden report. Collard greens, kale, all kinds of good. Let's see. We have been planting spinach, lettuce, broccoli, bok choy, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower. One of my favorite plants, yew choy sum, or they're known as flowering brassicas. There's a few different kinds that fall into that category. One that you are probably the most familiar with is very much related to mustard greens is broccoli rabe or rapini. All of these can be referred to as broccolini or what else are they? Broccolini and there's another name for them. But all of them I've seen referred to as such. That includes the more Italian style or Indian style broccoli rabe, as well as these yew choy sum, which actually means leaf stem flower. But there's some that are more related to kales. There's some that are more related to like a bok choy, and it really stands out in the flavor. We also have some that I kind of put into that category that are definitely a broccoli, and that would be your sprouting broccolis like calabrese or calabrese. If anybody knows how to say that right, let me know. Our Paracicaba sprouting broccoli from Brazil. These are all what I would consider flowering brassicas, meaning they kind of shoot up a stem, you harvest florets, you can eat some of the leaves, and it's a cut and come again. It'll just kind of keep producing. So that's the yew choy sum, and the choy sum family are more related to the bok choys, but they kind of bolt right out of the gate, just like as if your bok choy, you were growing it too late into the spring, and it started bolting from the heat. They're kind of built and meant to do that. So broccoli rabe, kale, collards, Swiss chard, mustard greens, and kohlrabi. Now, what do all these things have in common? They're not all directly related, but the one thing that they do have in common is they can all take very cold weather. And the other thing that they have in common is they are some of my favorite vegetables to eat, and we eat a lot of them. So we'll go kind of into what's been going on in my gardens. We are, as I said before, continuing to plant in succession root crops as well as these leafy vegetables. Now, we're still planting. We're still building gardens. We're still planting gardens. We're not putting things on hold. We're not waiting a few weeks. We're full tilt boogie because the window that we have to grow some of these cool weather crops is relatively small. Yes, we will get to that. Hamma, we will get to that. So, and you're not going to like it. So I'm, for those of you watching, I'm looking at comments. If you're looking on Facebook right now, you probably can't see the comment. It came in on, I'm sorry, if you're looking on YouTube, you can't see the comment. Somebody said on Facebook, can we go over winter tomatoes for us? And we'll talk about that. We'll discuss kind of what's going on with tomatoes and kind of where we're at with that. We just finished tearing out the last of our fall squash, our fall cucumbers. We still have eggplants that are hanging on and doing really well, especially Black Beauty eggplants. They like this cooler weather. The Japanese eggplants that really enjoy the heat of the summer, they're not doing too bad, but they're not doing too great either. But they're not dead and they're still producing. Tomatoes. Now, understand everybody, I'm in Tampa. I'm in, not quite in South Tampa. I'm not in North Tampa. I'm in Seminole Heights, which is about midway. So we're mid Tampa. And we haven't covered anything the past couple of days. We've seen frost on the roof lines, frost on the cars. But the tomatoes that we have planted are doing fine. They're showing some frost damage, but other than that, they're still doing really well. So, like I said, I'm going to kind of roll straight from this from the garden report into kind of talking about the seasons, where we're at with the season, why I look forward to this time of year, what the importance of December 21st, winter solstice, not just this year, but every year. Yeah, so we're kind of done with the nursery and the garden report. And I want to talk a little bit about what maybe some new gardeners are seeing as being a little unique or different with this year. And what I find to be more like sort of par for the course, in that we have seasons like this where we get a frost, cold weather, November or December, maybe every 2 to 3 years, maybe every 3 to 4 years, but sometimes they can be successive years, one back to back. So I kind of always plan on this. It's one of the reasons why since July, I've been telling everybody to get your tomatoes, your peppers, and your eggplants going early. The last 2 winters, I think, spoiled everybody in that we didn't get much frost or freezes in the Tampa area in Central Florida. I'm sure there's people in pockets in what would be considered Central Florida that would argue with me, but that's not normal. And I don't usually plan on that. If we don't get cold weather in November, December, it usually shows up for sure by, say, the end of January-ish. But I usually plan on, end of November, December could potentially be the end of your tomatoes. Now, whether or not we'll actually get out there to cover them, it depends on a few things. One, how early is the frost here? So, first week of December, that's pretty early. Also, I'm looking at the 2-week forecasts, and right now we're looking at keeping with this cooler weather through Christmas. I haven't looked. I think I could see up to the 22nd the other day. And again, everybody, I am talking about for Tampa. And we're looking at cooler weather. My phone keeps coming up on Banner Elk, North Carolina. I guess it wants me to go on vacation. Where are we at? So tomorrow morning is going to be 49. I can look through to the 23rd, and we're still in the 50s for morning temperature. That's through the 23rd. What that tells me is that, and that's the 50s for morning temperature, 70s, lower 70s, mid 70s, and 60s for daytime highs. That's great. That's a couple other mornings of 49. I mean, that's really good weather for most of the vegetable crops that people are going to have in right now. But what that does tell me is that probably a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks right after that is when we hit our really, really cold weather. And so the question you have to ask yourself is, do you want to be going out there every single night, doing it 1 week, maybe not having to do it the next week, but then the next week having to do it for 4 nights, covering up these plants if we're going to have a colder winter? And so tomatoes in particular, tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants, in my head, I have them categorized as a fall crop and a spring crop, not a winter crop. If we have a mild winter, they will cross over from fall and into spring. The fall winter crops, the crops that I consider fall crops and the crops that I consider spring crops, they're very temperamental. They don't really thrive over the summer, and they can't really take a frost. So the optimal time to be growing vegetables like tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, beans, squash, cucumbers is during these very short windows when the weather is what we would kind of call perfect. Like the weather we've been having right before this cold snap. The trade-off is think about the weather we were having right before this cold snap. I don't know about you guys, but my winter vegetables, my spinach, lettuce, broccoli, bok choy, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, yu choy sam, broccoli rabe, kale, collards, chard, carrots, beets, turnip, radish, mustards, kohlrabi. I'm sure there's more stuff I'm leaving off. Was struggling. It's a trade-off. So we're either going to do really, really well with the spring fall crops through fall and over the winter, or we're going to do really well with this stuff. Typically, we don't do well with both. So that being said, I'm not wasting my time and energy out there covering up my tomatoes. It sucks. It's unfortunate. But y'all, if this was a warm winter, your other vegetables would not be flourishing. So sometimes you just have to roll with the punches. What do I mean by that? Instead of crying over your tomatoes, I mean, like, who likes spinach? I love spinach. We could eat spinach all the time. It is rarely cold enough to have back-to-back multiple crops of spinach during our winters. So if we get a colder winter, y'all go out and plant more spinach. Stuff that's more heat tolerant, like collards and kale, they do make it, but they have problems. They have aphids on them when it's too warm. Y'all get out there and plant stuff that enjoys this weather instead of fighting it. I carry this same flag and raise this same mantra over the summers. The difference is during the summertime, we know what weather we're going to get. If you were to ask me if I would bet a bunch of money on what's the weather going to be next August, next September, October, November, well, August, forget I said August. Let's say end of September, October, November, December, January. I wouldn't bet much money on that. March, April, May, I wouldn't bet much money on that. I don't know what that weather is going to be doing. Now, maybe even June. July, August, I would bet all of my money on what that weather is going to be like next year. January, February, I would bet all of my money on what that weather is going to be like. I just don't know for how long. So we have these two windows of weather that weather tends to be pretty consistent. In January, into January, February, we have our 5-week long winter. So basically, as soon as you get all your cold weather crops going, boom, it gets too hot. What I'm trying to kind of get at is our spring fall crops, the stuff that is the temperate crops that I call them the Goldilocks plants. They don't like it too hot. They don't like it too cold. The windows of weather that they like to grow in late winter, spring, we have to kind of wait for it to not be so cold anymore, get out of the danger of frost. And we can typically grow them really, really well until it gets too hot in late spring, early summer. Okay. The problem is that we don't know how big that window is going to be. So if it stays cold a little bit too long and then gets hot a little bit too early, that season or those crops, they get pinched on both sides. So just like we saw that just happened in the fall, it stayed hot way too late and then got cold way too early. So that those crops, tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, cucumbers, the Goldilocks plants, the spring fall plants, the plants that don't like it over the summer and can't take a frost, their season got pinched this year. It happens. Roll with it. Be happy. Get out there and plant more. We'll read this again. Spinach, lettuce, broccoli, bok choy, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, yu choy sum, broccoli rabe, kale, collards, chard, carrots, beets, turnips, radishes, mustard, kohlrabi. Yo, that's a lot of food. That's a lot of food that is going to be out there singing and dancing in this weather. You're not going to be out there covering it, uncovering it, covering it. If you're really hunkering for tomatoes, you know, our tomatoes that we have out right now, they've been producing for a couple weeks. And it sucks. We might lose them. We might lose them to a frost. And I'm okay with that because underneath them, we're planting all these crops that love this colder weather. We're planting more of it because I'm hoping that things are going to swing that way. In the springtime, now, if you lose your plants and you're this much on your A game where you had tomatoes in right now, I have a couple pieces of advice. First of all, if your plants are still alive, go out there and take cuttings off the plants and root them and get them started in 4-inch pots. It's much easier to bring in plants that are in small pots than it is to cover up giant plants that are planted out in your garden. And what you're basically doing, so whether you're going to start seeds, if you're going to start seeds, start them in, I mean, gosh, we're already talking about what tomatoes, peppers, eggplants we're going to start for spring. Typically, it's about anywhere from the beginning of January to the end of January is when you want to get your spring tomatoes going here in Florida. And you start them in pots or containers or plugs or whatever it is you're going to start them in, and you plant them out and plant them up into bigger and bigger containers. And then you plant them out into your garden when we're out of the danger of frost, which I would say is somewhere between middle to end of February and March. We always get this like late winter, you know, early spring surprise frost that rolls through, catches everybody by surprise every year. Go figure. And like I would cover up those tomatoes. Those are tomatoes I would cover up. If it was the second week of February and I had planted tomatoes out thinking I did it, I'm good to go, I would cover those tomatoes up for sure. You know, if I already had them in the ground and they were already like kicking butt. I feel like this is too early. I think y'all are going to be wasting a lot of time out there covering and uncovering. And I think we have many more to come. I really do. I could be wrong. And you could get lucky and you cover your tomatoes and then you uncover them. And they're the other thing too is we have big problems with pests, you know, like blights, mealybugs, nematodes. My experience is these things all attack sick and stressed plants first. So I think, even if I was covering and uncovering tomato plants all winter, I don't think you would be doing yourself a disservice to plant another round of tomatoes, fresh seed, fresh cuttings, whatever, in midwinter for planting out in the spring. Because when that heat hits, those are the tomatoes that are going to carry you further than the ones that you overwintered and are already going into spring all stressed out. And I've done this experiment. I've had tomato plants that we've covered all winter, and then in the springtime, we cut them way back and refertilize them and give them fresh compost. And, I've always thought, well, they're going to have bigger root systems, so they're going to pop up. Well, I started just out of curiosity's sake in January planting a seed of that same variety in a 4-inch pot, and I would leave it right next to the other one. Now, if we got really cold weather, I'd cover that one back up and I'd take my 4-inch pot inside for the night, and then I'd bring it back out there so it was getting sunshine with the warmer weather, and I would just continue this. And then in the spring, when it finally warmed up enough, I would literally take this now taller plant, probably in a gallon pot, and I would plant it out right next to this other one that was already started, supposed to be ahead of the game, and I would get more better tomatoes off the fresh one for the spring. The ones that I've overwintered before, early summer, those are always the ones that get hit the worst with nematodes. So even if you are going to try and save these tomatoes, I mean, it just sucks. It sucks because usually our fall tomatoes, we can have them producing through the end of December and into January. So usually when I'm ripping those plants out, we've gotten 8-12 weeks of production out of them, not 3 or 4 or nothing. So, that's it with the tomatoes. If you're new to this and you're going to try and overwinter a tomato plant and you're going to try and, tough it out through the spring, do yourself a favor and just plant some other seeds of, if you have some left over of the same kind of tomato. If you don't, take some cuttings off the tomato plant you have right now and go ahead and start them in water and pot them up. And like I said, do that, take them out for walks during the day so they get sunshine, keep them well watered, bring them in when the weather gets cold. And just, I want you to see side by side what these plants look like in the springtime that you limped through the winter compared to your freshy fresh of the fresh. Because then maybe next winter you won't be wasting so much time and you'll plant more spinach like I'm suggesting you do right now, instead of spending all your time out there covering and uncovering your tomatoes. Now, I'm speaking mostly to your annual garden right now. I know some of you probably want to talk a little bit about your perennials and fruit trees, and maybe you've got some more tropical stuff and you're pushing the zones. Obviously, that stuff needs to get covered. If it's in the ground, I've seen people construct, something around it where it makes it really easy for them to cover and uncover. I've seen people actually put a greenhouse around them. But what I've seen a lot of people do is they just keep them in giant pots and then drag them around the yard as needed. I personally, in my gardens, now when I keep talking about my gardens, I administer and work in a good handful of community gardens and small urban farm projects that I go to every week and provide them with advice and consultation work and products and teach them how to garden and grow their food. So when I keep talking about my gardens, this is what I'm talking about. And most of my projects, one of the most precious commodities that we have is blood, sweat, and tears, people. So I don't like doing a bunch of stuff that causes a bunch more work. I don't know if it'll be next week, but probably the following week. My topic is going to be ROI, gardening, return on investment, where I really want to get down and dirty and talk about the line that is the blurry line, the huge blurry line between gardening for, entertainment, pleasure, exercise, therapy, all the other great things that gardening does for us, and cutting making that distinction between actually trying to do at least some stuff that is worth your time, like a return on your investment in food, in actual food that you're growing, and what crops I think are the best for that, which ones I think are the worst for that, but also can be the most pleasurable to grow because maybe they're a little bit challenging. Maybe we have good years some year. Maybe their taste is superior when you actually do nail it. We'll talk a lot about that, but I want to make the distinction between a return on investment gardening for your time and for your dollars, and which plants are really good at that. Whereas I think everything else can fall in that category. I mean, anyway, I don't want to get into my topic over the next 2 weeks, but we are going to get more into that. The tomatoes would kind of fall into that category. You know, is it really a good return on your investment to be out there trying to limp something through this weather? Whereas maybe at this point you just need to cut your losses and plant some stuff that is going to really give back to you during this cold weather. It's rare. I mean, if I had to look at the past 5 years, I would say having a colder winter like this is a rarity. Before that, it was the norm. I don't know what, if we're on a trajectory, which we very well probably are, or if we're in some 10-year cycle, won't know for a few more years. And if we're going to, dip back down into a colder cycle, or if we're just going to keep getting warmer and warmer over the wintertime. My guess is we are going to get colder over the wintertime. And basically what's going to happen is that window for your spring fall crops is what's going to get smushed. I think our summers are going to get hotter and our winters are going to get colder. And that time period of temperate weather in Central Florida is going to get smaller and smaller. So basically we're going to go from hot to cold, and then we're going to go from cold to hot. It's not going to be any in between. So learning how to enjoy these winter crops during cold weather. And then if you go on my website and look at heat loving greens and things, and you learn how to enjoy those crops that love the heat and humidity over the summertime. I tell new people who are new to this, if you can actually basically grow this stuff till it won't grow anymore. I'll read it one more time. Spinach, lettuce, broccoli, bok choy, Brussels sprouts. By the way, if I'm leaving anything off, guys, please post it in the comments. I jotted these down right before I started. These are winter crops that, although some might be heat tolerant, can take a frost or a freeze, or mild freeze or a frost. So these are what I would consider to be winter crops, even though some of them we might plant and grow in the fall. We definitely grow them through the winter, and they might grow into spring. So, but I still consider them, hang on, guys. But I still consider them to be winter crops. So I'm going to read this list one more time. Spinach, lettuce, broccoli, bok choy, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, choy sum, broccoli rabe, kale, collards, chard, carrots, beets, turnips, rutabagas, radish, mustard, kohlrabi. If you go on my website and look at my list, heat loving greens and things. So if you basically grew what's on this list right now, and yep, Michelle got the brassicas, radish mustards. Yeah, I got radish mustards, and then I named the brassicas. If you grow this stuff until you can't, till it won't, March, April-ish, maybe into May, some of the stuff, and you switch directly to stuff off my heat-loving greens and things list, and then you grew all that stuff until the weather gets nice at the end of September, middle of October, and you switch straight to this list, you'd never have any, like hardly any bug problems. You would have the easiest garden. Now, you're not going to get tomatoes. You're not going to get green beans, but you're going to get Japanese long beans over the wintertime. You're not going to, well, on my heat loving greens and things list, we do have some cucumbers. We do have some broccoli. We do have some carrots. We have lots of greens. We have lots of things, greens and things that love the heat of the summer. So this stuff loves the winter time, and the things on my heat-loving greens and things list love the summer. Anytime you divert off of both of those lists, basically you are trying to grow stuff during a very narrow pocket that may be really, really narrow some years. So like imagine if it starts warming up a little bit in the spring, like it's just not like super cold anymore. We're out of danger of frost. We don't have any freezing weather by Valentine's Day. And then the heat and humidity and like nasty, terrible, gross weather doesn't hit until Father's Day. We're going to have a great season. But if we get really cold weather up till like March 1st and then it gets super hot the beginning of May, you're going to have a terrible spring season of spring crops. And then same thing in the fall, like what we just went through. So don't put all your eggs in those baskets. I'm not saying not to grow some of that stuff, but, you know, be willing to cut your losses. You know, I usually in gardens might be growing 75% of what I'm growing is off one of these lists of either winter stuff or summer stuff. And then 25% of what I'm growing space-wise is what I would consider to be the Goldilocks plants. Now, some years we have just really mild weather and everybody does great. But most of the time we get these big swings in temperature. You know, I kind of call it gardening roulette. And if you're gardening correctly, then other than just a few, thank you, Katrina. Yes, onions over the winter. I told you I left some stuff off. Onions. Yes, onions over the winter time. Onions. That's a good one. The colder it is. And if you're, for those of you growing fruit trees that, you know, require chill hours, this is great. These chill hours are great for your blueberries, for our peaches, for apricots, for apples, pears, if you're a little further north. Where was I at? So yeah, the onions threw me off. Thanks, Katrina. That's good. The other thing I wanted to talk about before I get into the questions, garlic, if you are brave and Dave's hypothesis is right. I'm going to get into y'all's comments in just a second, but I want to talk about the importance of these couple weeks that we're in right now, all the way up to winter solstice, and then the couple weeks after winter solstice, why this is super important, and why I'm really excited about this time of year. And, you know, people have been celebrating this time of year for a long time. It way predates most of the holidays that we have going on this time of year. There's all types of festivals and all types of religion and all types of cultures. And one thing I find that's pretty consistent is they all tend to be around, you know, New Year's is around the solstice. That's, you know, the 21st of December. And that is the day that the sun is the lowest in the sky. So after that, immediately after that, but to your eyes, a couple days, a week or so after that, the sun begins getting higher in the sky. If you've been growing, as people up north don't quite go through this like we do down here, because we're actually growing stuff through the solstice. One thing I've noticed is that I'll be watching my stuff grow. And if you kind of go out there and check on your stuff every week, from about mid-October, end of October, every week when I go check on my gardens, everything's a little bigger, but it's a little bigger, a little bit less than it was the week before. A little bigger, a little bit less. And then the next week, it's a little bigger, but less bigger, right? All the way till about a week until maybe 3 or 4 days before the winter solstice and 3 or 4 days after the winter solstice. It's like everything just stops growing. Like I'll go from 1 week to the next week and everything will look exactly the same. And then about a week after winter solstice, it's like everything starts growing again. And that's because that sun is getting higher in the sky. But it's just kind of neat how when you garden and you pay attention to where the sun is and how high it is up in the sky, and you really watch your garden, you'll really begin to see why people celebrated this time of year so much. Because, you know, most people did not have a grocery store to go to get their food. They relied on what they could grow right then and there. And even for people who lived in places where they couldn't grow over the winter time, they still saw the sun getting higher in the sky as, you know, a kind of a reset of a clock to that many days until the snow started melting, when they could get out there and plant stuff, to be able to eat, to be able to live. So this is a time of year that gardeners have kind of an extra reason to understand and celebrate the seasons that we have right now. Literally, the season that we have right now is we're also celebrating the day that the sun begins to start getting higher in the sky. And I've been talking with people for the past couple days about, you know, they put their garden in a slightly wrong spot, and the sun has dipped down lower in the sky than they expected, and their garden is in full shade, and their plants have slowed down on their growth. We're going through the same thing even in gardens that we have out in the middle of sun. They're getting full sun, because two things are going on right now. One, the sun's rays are getting less intense, so less physical UV photon light actually hitting the plants, which does two things. The plant's going to grow slower because it's not getting as much direct sunlight. Number two, what the plants do with that sunlight is they don't just convert it into food for themselves, but they also convert it into food for the soil. And what they make with photosynthesis is a carbon, kind of a sugar, and they'll actually push that down and exude it out of their roots. And the biology that's in the soil will actually consume that carbon, those sugars, and they'll use that energy. It excites them. It's actually a method of communication between the plant and the soil. Well, even on a good day, the soil microbes in colder weather slow down. So we got kind of two things going on. We have less sunlight, which that alone, your plant's going to slow growth. Therefore, plants creating less sugar to push down to its roots. So even on a good day, the soil microbes are going to slow down, and the soil's colder, which on a good day, that would cause the soil microbes to slow down. So one of the things that I use a lot of is my Compost Plus product. I use a lot of it more often over the winter months, because it has the ability to actually feed the plants a little bit, and then it also contains some sugar that feeds the soil. So that lessening of growth that I was talking about, how, you know, you come out one week in October and the stuff's this much bigger, and then you come out the next week and it's this much bigger, and you come out the next week and it's this much bigger, and you come out the next week and it's this much, all the way to the week around Christmas where you come out and it's literally the same size. I've mitigated that some by starting to use my Compost Plus product more often. So when I say more often, I mean usually when my plants are rocking and rolling and kind of on a good trajectory, I don't use it throughout the season. I only use it in the beginning, except during these like 6 weeks surrounding December 21st, to just keep those plants growing well and to keep that soil active even during the colder winter. Mulching with some hay or mulch would help with that as well, kind of insulate the ground. If it looks like we're going to get real freezes, hard freezes, we'll have a completely different conversation about some things that we should be doing. But right now, mostly what I'm talking about is frost and keeping that soil temperature up a little bit higher. Another thing you can do is water at the roots. Even though it seems really, really cold, the water coming out of your pipes is probably a lot warmer than the air when it gets cold out. So that'll keep that soil a little bit warmer. But for the most part, my message to you, to everybody, is enjoy it, ride it out. We don't get cold weather like this every December. Plant more spinach, plant more kale. Enjoy the cold. Don't fight it by trying to keep your spring fall crops going. I mean, you could do what you want. I'm just saying what I do and what I recommend to my customers. Spring's around the corner. We'll have plenty of weeks to grow this stuff. And Corey mentioned earlier, one of the other points of really being happy about this colder weather is, I want to say 3 winters ago was a mild winter, and in the past 2 years was really mild. And what I've noticed is exponential growth of insects and our bug problems. So one of the things that I really enjoy when we finally have a cold, wet winter is it knocks the bug populations back. Guys, I'm sick of fighting white flies. They've just been getting worse and worse from year to year. And hopefully we'll have a nice cold winter and they'll slow those populations down, because y'all, insect populations, they grow exponentially. So when we go into spring with already a nice bedrock of high insect populations that will grow exponentially, it's not a good situation. So the colder our winters are, the more it knocks those bug populations back. It's a good thing, y'all. It is a good thing that we're actually getting some real seasons this year instead of just having a perpetual spring, fall, winter where it's just like moderately cold. I'm hoping we get some freezing weather here in Tampa. We need it. We haven't had any in a long time, but maybe it'll just be frost. So let's see what you guys had to say today. Thank you, everybody, by the way, for tuning in. I really enjoy doing these. All right, Michelle says not covering anything. Denise says left spinach. Kenny Gill, plant diversity, but also know when to plant what. 90 to 95% winter veggies, but then play with that 5 to 10% and see if you can push it. This is how you can see if you are in a microclimate. That's what I was saying is, mine was what, 75%, 25%, 75% of what I know is for that season. And then another 25% of space is stuff that I play around with. I say if you're gardening correctly in Central Florida, at any given point, I should be able to go visit your garden, and somewhere between 30 and 60% of your garden should look like absolute crap, and then the rest of it should look amazing. That means you're planting diversity, and the weather just swung the wrong way, and now these are doing really well. And that, 60 to 70% that's doing really well, if the weather swings in the direction that the weather is supposed to be swinging in during that season, those should be the crops that are doing really well that you have the majority of. If the weather is swinging the other direction and the weather's not cooperating and being the way it's supposed to be during that season, that should be the stuff that you have. Kenny says 5 to 10%. I'm saying 25% should be doing really well. There's 2 times a year that your garden should look perfect, picture perfect. One of them is around the end of January to mid-February. And the reason why is because around the end of January to mid-February, you probably should not have any spring stuff in your garden yet. And you should have given up on your fall stuff. You should only have winter stuff in your garden. This stuff that's on my list, you should only have that stuff in by mid-January. And then your garden will look perfect, because we get cold weather during that time every single year. I'm just thankful that this year it's extended by 6 weeks. Thank goodness we're getting colder weather in December, because now I can have happy winter vegetables for longer. The other time your garden should look picture perfect.
You have 3 weather capsules.
Y'all, my phone talks to me when I'm not talking to it. It's really creepy. So the other time of year that you should have a perfect garden is end of July, beginning of August, because by that time you should, if you are starting any of your fall stuff, it should probably be in plug trays or pots, protect it from the rain, and maybe some shade cloth if needed, getting some of your fall stuff started early. Your spring stuff should be gone by then. I do not want to answer another person that's asking me about what to spray on their tomato plants at the end of July. They should be gone. They should be torn out. I don't care if your tomato plants have nematodes on them at the end of July. They should have nematodes on them at the end of July. That is a sick, tired plant. These are not perennials. We're not keeping them for years. If you want to keep some like peppers or whatever for years, keep them in pots where you can control the environment a little bit better. So around July, end of July, your garden should look perfect because it should either be covered up and being solarized, covered up and mulched, or you should have stuff off my heat-loving greens and things list. And that stuff loves that weather. Like the more miserable you are outside, the happier these plants are. So those are the 2 times a year that your garden should be picture perfect. The rest of the year, your garden should look like, I don't know, 10% to 60% complete crap, because you should have enough diversity in your garden just to make sure that if it's April, May, and your garden looks perfect, I'm going to tell you, we're either having a real weird year where the weather's just like not hot, not cold, it's just kind of perfect, or you screwed up, because if the weather would have swung at all the other direction, your whole garden would be dead. In November, December, if your garden looks perfect, I'm telling you, you got lucky. That means you planted all too much of one thing and the weather just so happened to cooperate with you. So you need to go to gardening roulette. If we went to the casino and we wanted to win at the roulette game, and I don't mean bring home money, I mean like if we actually wanted to win the spin, right? The way you win the spin is you got to lose the spin. The way you win the spin is you put a chip on every single number, right? Cover all your bases. Now, no matter where that thing lands, you're going to be like, oh, I won. I lost all that, but I won that one. And with gardening, we're looking for some successes. If you plant 6 things in your garden, 6 different types of things, and 3 to 4 of them are doing really well, then you're doing really well. If you're harvesting 2, 3, 4 things out of your garden at once, you're doing really well. It's don't expect everything to make it. In fact, if everything is making it, unless it's during winter or summer and you have winter stuff in and summer stuff in, if all your stuff is doing really well, then we're either having a year that's an anomaly or you screwed up, because like I said, if the weather swings the other direction, you're going to lose everything. You're not going to get anything. Okay, Michelle James. Kenny Gill, my peach trees are still loaded with pretty green leaves. 0 loss, 0 brown. Rob Clemens just left my house and was like, what the bleep? I got flowers on mine right now. I got peach flowers. I got flowers on my blueberries right now too. Kenny Gill, cauliflower from seed to production time. Better go with starts at this point. None of my seed germinated. Not the good wetwam seeds. No, it's perfect time to plant cauliflower. You plant cauliflower, plant it again. You can plant it every day now between now and end of February. Like, just don't stop planting cauliflower. If you want lots of cauliflower, because it's definitely not a cut and come again plant, just keep planting it. And get your seeds from me next time, because they'll germinate. And if they won't, I'll replace them. Yvonne, I didn't read your what you put in before that. I just read cloves. I'm like, cloves? We can grow cloves? If y'all didn't see it in her comments, she wrote before that, she wrote, I'm trying the elephant garlic cloves. So she mistyped and then she was correcting herself. Garlic cloves. Good luck. Let me know how your garlic works out. That garlic is not going to land on my return on investment talk that I'm going to be doing in 2 weeks. I hope one day somebody proves me wrong, but there's just some things that I'm probably going to buy from gardeners or small farmers or at the grocery store. And that's just me. but I'll at least mentally, if I do get into anything like that, I'll have it mentally categorized in my brain as the hobby basket. You know, I mean, like, what's your return? What's my return on investment for my fishing hobby? I'm definitely spending $10,000 on a pound of fish. You know, I enjoy it. That's why I do it. So I'm not knocking that side of gardening at all. But I do think it might be important for some people, especially right now, who are getting into gardening and growing their own food, which crops are worth, you know, your time as an investment if you're trying to feed your family and not go broke doing it. Melanie, full container grow box gardener here. My tomatoes and zucchini are fruiting well this week. Thank you for the seeds. I'm going to tear out fall crops and plant spinach and bok choy per your recommendation. Now, Melanie, the zucchini, if you got it from us, is a desert zucchini that's extremely powdery mildew resistant. And that one we plant and grow all winter every year. If we lose it to a frost or a freeze, we lose it to a frost or a freeze. I'm usually out there the next week, unless I'm looking at the 2-week forecast and seeing more frosts and freezes. I'm usually out there the next week putting more seed in the ground. Because most of the time we can't grow zucchinis and yellow squash. And our yellow squash now is a powdery mildew resistant yellow squash as well. I just haven't grown it yet myself over the winter. So we're experimenting with that one to see if it is true. But our zucchinis, our desert zucchinis that are in right now are still producing, and they're producing very well. I have a feeling I'm going to show up to some of these gardens next week, and half the leaves are going to be burned off from frost, but that's okay if they're not dead. I'm definitely not going to cover them. I'm going to plant some other cold tolerant stuff around them. MJ, planted jicama from you back in August. When should I harvest? So see, August, September, October, November, December. Jicama takes about 5 months. It slows down, I'd say more like 6 or 7 if you're creeping into the winter months. It likes the longer days of summer. I've grown it over the winter time and done very well with it. It just takes forever. So check on it. You can kind of, just like a carrot, you can kind of dig around in the soil around your plant. And if the jicama is ready, it's down in there. You'll be able to find it. And if it's a huge jicama, just like a sweet potato, it'll kind of start poking its head out. And then Yvonne says, I'm interested in planting tatsoi. Is this a good time? Yes, Yvonne. And actually, we have a couple of really wonderful, interesting types of tatsoi. Let me see if I can tatsoi-like plants. So one of them, if you go on our website, I might have them both categorized under tatsoi. If you go on my website and go under fruits and vegetables, and then up in the left corner, it says type with a little carrot, not carrot, but like, you know, carrot symbol. And then if you scroll down, that's categorizes everything by like cucumber, corn, collards, flowering brassica. And I believe we have them categorized as tatsoi. No, I don't. How can you find these things? I swear, Asian greens. That's got to be it. Yes, they're under Asian greens. A for Asian greens. So under fruits and veggies, and then under Asian greens, we have our Mizuna and Mabuna, which are both really mild mustards and absolutely delicious. We have our red pak choy, which is the bok choy, our Chinese white-stemmed pak choy, chrysanthemum greens. Oh, I forgot to mention those. They are amazing, beautiful flowers, and you eat the leaves. They're delicious, and they can take a frost, and they're wonderful. They only can be grown during this cool weather. Oh, nasturtiums, snapdragons. What else? Gosh, I totally limited the list of what really enjoys this weather. But anyway, under Asian greens, Yvonne, the two that I've listed, the tatsoi, one is choho, really good, wonderful spinachy flavor, kind of like a spinachy bok choy flavor. And then the other one, I always butcher this word, is called red koma tasuna spinach mustard. And it's a beautiful purple. Let's see if you can, I don't know if you can see it. Let's see if you can see it on my phone. Absolutely wonderful. Those are like, tatsoi is like a loose leaf bok choy, wonderful cut and come again plant. A plant that's just going to keep on giving to you more and more and more. All right, Katrina, I'm starting a 1/4 acre garden from scratch with well-draining sandy soil. I have a large supply of rabbit manure mixed with hay. How would you recommend I use this to build up my garden beds? I would just fill your garden beds up with rabbit manure. If you run out of rabbit manure, I don't know where you live, Katrina, but we have a local goat farm here in Tampa, over there off Racetrack Road, just north of East Bay, Oldsmar-ish, north of Oldsmar, called the Dancing Goat. And you can go pick up all the goat manure you want from her for free. But I would just line your beds with that stuff on the bottom and then maybe put in 5 inches, maybe a little more of garden soil on top. And then you can get planting right away. I mean, it really depends on how much. If it's like fresh manure and fresh hay, you might do better with mixing it some with garden soil and then filling the bottom of your beds with that. 5 inches of that, and then 5 inches of finished garden soil on top. Kenny Gill, it's really good. I just popped my tatsoi plugs in a week or 2 ago. What kind of tatsoi are you growing, Kenny? If you're still there. And then Vaughn said it's fun. Doris said it will grow. Tatsoi does really well. Oh, you're talking about the garlic. Yvonne's still talking about the garlic. Yeah, I've heard from people it will grow. I'm just wondering, if it grows so well, I've never seen anybody growing it on any type of scale. Like, I hope I'm wrong. I hope that it can be grown. And I mean, even things that aren't commercially grown in Florida, I've still at least seen them grown at scale if it's viable. I don't know. I'm thinking it's going to be, maybe it's that it's hit or miss. I don't know. I really don't know why. If everybody who tells me that they grow garlic tells me it's so super easy, admittingly, this is not something I have failed at because it's not something I've tried. And I'm just going off of, yes, Josh Jameson does grow garlic, and he says that you can grow it really well. Again, I mean, I'm just wondering why most of the people I know who've tried it don't do it. And then there's a few scattered people here and there that say that they're successful at it. And I always tell them, if you're so successful at it, then write down your formulas and go make $1 million, because if garlic can be grown here in Florida, I'm sure we can pull it as a crop. I mean, I might just be being a crusty old man who, is resisting change. But I'm trying to go a different route. I'm trying to hunt down contacts in the islands and in Cuba and in Brazil, Australia, and I'm trying to find out maybe what types of garlic they grow. So instead of trying to find a garlic that we can trick to growing here, I'm trying to find a garlic that we can grow here, because all these other ones of storing it in the refrigerator for this many days at this much humidity and then pulling it out and sprinkling fairy dust on it and putting a blindfold on and putting one eye out and planting it on the full moon. I don't consider that you can grow it here. I just don't. That doesn't fall. I get it. People can do it. But if you have to cold stratify something that hardcore, then we're trying with the wrong varieties. That's my point. And garlic is in so much traditional cuisine from around the world, from regions that get and stay way hotter than ours. There has to be varieties of garlic out there that can be grown in Central and South Florida. I'm convinced of that. Taking these other varieties and shaving off the corners of the square and cramming it in the round hole, whereas it might be successful, I don't consider that a success. A possibility, a hobby, an enjoyment, but I don't consider that a success. So there's my stand on it, on the garlic. I hope so, Kenny. I hope your Thai fire garlic. That was when you listed off your garlics. That was the one I was most excited about. You are growing that one, correct? Turban garlics, I think. Look into it. I mean, Kenny, I've heard types of garlics. Like, okay, this type of garlic is more heat tolerant and might do better here. I'm looking for specific cultivars from areas of the world where it's being grown commercially, even on a small scale, being used by locals regularly, being used by restaurants regularly, where they don't have to stick it in the refrigerator for 8 weeks and you do this humidity and do that thing. Like literally this garlic is for here and they plant it and it grows. I know it's out there. And rather than us spending so much time on trying to figure out how to grow these other types of garlics here in Central Florida, I think we should all pull together and pull our resources and try and figure out what cultivars of these. So, I mean, even you're mentioning turban garlics. What cultivars of the turban garlics would do here? What cultivars of the elephant garlics would do best here? That's the direction I think we need to be going with things like garlic. And that's why I'm not going to put my flag in the ground that we are successful at garlic here in Florida, because I know how to pronounce that. Ayo Rojo is a turban, I think. So I was looking at that one in particular as well, and I just I think we're getting closer with some of those varieties, but I don't think it's nailing it on the head. Still think we're trying to find the most heat tolerant varieties of other areas of our country that are commonly grown here in other countries. But the Thai fire one, you said that when you mentioned that one I thought had the most promise. It's really interesting if you look at a globe and take a globe, look at it, look where Florida is compared to the equator. Look where Florida is compared to the continent and the ocean. And then you can actually go, so take your finger and draw a strip right along so that your finger is right at the same distance from the equator, and go all the way around the world in the northern hemisphere by like Central Florida. And then also understand that, if you look at Africa, which side of Africa is the desert on, and then which side. So if we were looking at stuff from Africa, we would, on the northern hemisphere, we would want to look at stuff on the east side of Africa. And then when you go over to India, stuff that's from the east side of India, and then you get over to East Asia, and you look at the stuff on the east side of Asia. And you'll see the west side of these continents have kind of the similar, and then you see the stuff on the east side, same distance from the equator, has about the same weather. So those are the regions we need to be looking for. But you can do the same thing on south of the equator. Same thing, go the same distance from the equator as we are, in Florida. And then you got to go on the opposite side, the west side of the continents, down south of the equator. And you'll start to see maybe it is the same side of the continent. It might still be the east side of the continents. That you'll find areas that have very similar weather to Central Florida. Those are the areas that we need to be looking to for some of these crops, the problem with going with some stuff that's from like further south from us, it's not a consistent problem, but it is a little bit of a problem with looking at, say Cuba and Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic. As we get closer to the equator, some areas of Mexico, as we get down closer to the equator, a lot of the annual vegetables and things that we find thrive. So where you start finding stuff that's more and more heat tolerant, unless, of course, it was cultivated in some area with high elevation. You always got to take that into consideration. A lot of those vegetables, as you get that are from places from closer and closer to the equator, they tend to need more and more sunlight for longer periods of time. So that's why when you start getting into things like, black beans, that they need, 12 hours or more for over 5 months of the year to really thrive. And that's because they're from a place that gets more than 12 hours of sunlight for way more months than we get more than 12 hours of sunlight here. As you get further and further from the equator, until you get on the equator where it's 12 hours of sunlight, 12 hours a night, year round. And as you get further and further from the equator, the amount of sunlight you have over the wintertime diminishes. The amount of sunlight you have during the summertime increases, but the time at which you have that much sunlight, like the number of months, decreases. So the problem with looking for crops too close to the equator is they have a tendency to need more sunlight longer than what we can give them here during our summer months. So if anybody else has anything else, I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Next week, I'll be looking for a guest. I think I'm going to ask Michelle James to come on the show. So hopefully that'll be fun. Rob, I might come after you one day. And Kenny, I got to have you back on too now that you're elbows deep in the middle of your school year. I want to talk about, get you back on. I think you were my first guest. So that should get me through the new year. Michelle says, no, let's see. Look. Michelle says, LOL. But yeah, so thank you everybody for joining me. If you can't join me live, if you're watching this pre-recorded and you would like to throw up some garden questions for me to answer live, and then you can rewatch it recorded, you can send those questions or topics to info at whitwamorganics.com, and I will bring up your question and go over it during the podcast. So thank you everybody for joining me, and I hope you guys all have a good rest of your week, and I will see you all next week.